Hey, Launch family. I wanted to tell you how much we love doing this show and how much we love you for tuning in every single week. Our Launch family is awesome. And one of the things we love about this show is that it's free for you. Anyone can listen to this, feel inspired, and take action towards the next launch. And Jeff and I want to keep giving you the resources that you need to get you launched. So if you haven't yet, I want you to go check out our Dare to Launch show bonus vault. Inside this vault, Jeff and I are regularly releasing all kinds of launch goodies exclusively for you, our Launch family. There's extra conversations with people that we interviewed, extra stuff you've never seen or heard on the podcast yet. Jeff's rules for copywriting is in there. And we just released something called the Transformational Value Manifesto. Transformational value is the secret sauce to creating offers that you know your customers will go crazy for. So in this bonus, you'll discover what transformational value is, how to discover yours, and how you can use it to create offers that really convert. So go to daretolaunchshow.com/taco, enter your email, and get access to the bonus vault absolutely free. Now here's today's Dare to Launch.
I design hand-spun yarn. I think it's probably one of the more out there niches that maybe you've come across in the PLF world. I had the idea that I've got to teach something and we're going to knit something as a community and we're going to try this formula and see, how it works. And the first day I made $12,000. I've always had this problem where I have more followers on Instagram than I have on my list. And it finally feels like there's a way for me to easily bring people from one place to the other. I joined Launch Club there, and the next launch was the craziest launch I've ever had in my life. It was life-changing, really life-changing.
Hello, Launch family. So happy to have you listening to today's episode. My name is Chris, and as always, I am joined by my co-host, Mr. Jeff Walker.
Hey, folks.
And today, we have a very special guest for you. She's the creator of Knit Collage and a member of Jeff's Launch Club Mastermind group, and all-around awesome person, Amy Small. Welcome to our show.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm excited to be here.
Yeah, we're very excited to have you on the show too, and to talk about your business, which is a unique business. And maybe we can start there because maybe people listening don't know what Knit Collage is. If you could tell us a little bit about your business and your story, and then we'll dive into some of the conversations around business.
Yeah, definitely. So I design hand spun yarn. It's definitely out there. I don't know. I think it's probably one of the more out there niches that maybe you've come across in the PLF world. I design hand-spun yarns, and I work with a team of women in India who spins them all. So there are 16 women that spin our yarns. And I also design knitting and crochet patterns, and I teach online. So I kind of do everything from the materials all the way through the patterns and what to do with the yarn, to teaching you how to make something if you've never knit or crochet before. And then we also have community around it so that you can find your people that also like to do this thing with you.
So you're dealing with a sort of, I would say it's a narrow niche. There's probably lots of people who knit, but it's a unique niche in the world of business. Did you say it's all hand, woven or something in India?
Yes. Yes.
How did you set that up?
If I hadn't have met Jeff, I definitely wouldn't be doing it still. Do you ever look back at how far you've come and you're like, oh my God, that was a lot. So I used to design sweaters for free people, which is part of Urban Outfitters. And some people know that brand. It was an amazing dream job, but I was working 24/7. It was a lot. And it's also very fast fashion. So it's just constantly coming up with new designs all the time. And as a creative person, it's hard to come up with a lot of designs all the time on demand like that. And so I was feeling called to do something else. And on the side, I had been designing yarns and spinning on a spinning wheel and carding my own fibers and spinning by myself, maybe for a year or two. And I had this idea, maybe I can try and sell these yarns. I have no idea, if anyone will buy them. I didn't even know how to knit at this point, because as a sweater designer working with factories in Asia, it's very different than designing knitting patterns. Does that make sense? If you're designing like commercially graded sweaters for the masses, it's very different than the hand knitting niche. So I didn't even know how to knit, but I thought, you know what, I'm making these yarns, I'm really enjoying it. I'm going to see if anybody's interested in them. So I emailed like 8 yarn store owners and one responded. And I remember being like, I have a business. It's a business now. This is a thing I can do in the world. And I was living in Hong Kong at the time, and I had just quit the Free People job, decided I was going to try and work this. I was also working 9 freelance jobs at the time and like trying to do this as a side hustle. And I spun those yarns and sold them to this incredible store in London that still sells our yarn. And that's sort of how it all got started. Slowly, I decided I couldn't spin them all on my own. So I was going to have to figure out a way for other people to make them. And I've always had this huge love affair with India. And I knew from traveling there and making things in the past that it was going to be a really good fit for our aesthetic, what I was trying to create through the yarns. So I teamed up with a woman that I worked with in my Free People days who helped me recruit everyone, our team of 16 that I told you about. So that's sort of how that all got started. The things that we saw in the beginning, it was like just a nightmare because they had never done it before. We were creating this industry out of nothing. So it was kind of a mess what we saw. But we made it work after a lot of learnings. We made it into something that we could sell over and over again. And that's sort of how it all got started. I moved back to my parents' basement, maybe like 6 months into starting the business, and had all the yarn shipped there. And I would personally like QA, which is or I would do all the quality control, QC. That's what it's called, QC it all. I would do all that, ship it out I was only selling to yarn stores. So it was only wholesale. And that was my existence for like the first year of being in business, maybe first year or 2 even. I've had the business a while, actually.
Wow. So it must have been an interesting step that way. Like you having this, going from sort of like the job thing to doing your own thing. Was it really successful at that point? Or you were, obviously going back home to your parents' basement. I'm going to guess that wasn't the plan, but it was necessity, right? Okay.
No, when I quit Free People, I already had a few freelance jobs lined up that actually paid way more combined than my full-time job. And I even had an assistant for that business because a lot of Asian companies were looking for a designer who had kind of a Western design eye to like tell them what's cool in the States and Europe. So I didn't have trouble getting work that way. And it was actually well-paid work. And what was so great about it is that it allowed me to set my own schedule. So I'd always work on Knit Collage in the mornings when I am the sharpest. And slowly, I was able to quit those jobs. And by the time I moved back to my parents, it was still a real leap, but I was able to feel confident that I could support one person with the business. At that point, I quit all the other jobs.
All 9 of them.
It was a lot. It was a lot. It was a lot. It was an intense time. There was a lot of caffeine consumption.
If for everyone listening, you're about to hear a crazy launch story that Amy had. So hold on, you were just getting the background here, but yeah, the punchline is pretty ridiculous. So because I know, we know each other real well. You're in the mastermind, and I know your story super well. Then you were selling. You're having this yarn spun. Is that the right word? Having the yarn spun or created?
Yes, exactly.
In India, you're importing it, and now you're in the wholesale business selling to yarn stores. And what was that business like?
Oh my God. It was not good. So I quickly learned that my margins weren't great. I'd never been in business before, but selling wholesale, my margins were really slim. They sell the yarn for double what I sold it to them for, pretty much. And also, these stores are really hard to work with. So some yarn stores are run really well, but some aren't. maybe like small business, mom and pop shops everywhere. I spent a lot of time chasing down shops for like $500 or less. It was so painful, it was just unsustainable. I went into debt at that time because I so believed in the business. We had the orders coming in, but the margins just weren't there. So I was selling to something like 200 stores worldwide. It was awesome on paper, but it actually wasn't viable. And it was me doing everything. And the other really crazy thing that I learned, I didn't realize it at the time, was that it's very hard to sell to stores in California versus New York versus Oklahoma or Minnesota. They each have a different aesthetic, what they're looking for. So I was really tailoring what I put out into the world based on what the stores were asking me for, not what I wanted to do. Does that make sense? So it wasn't really like I was being super true to myself and creating things that I really wanted to create. I was trying to tailor my designs and what I put out into the world to make all of these buyers happy, especially our biggest buyers. And that was also not sustainable, I think, either. So it wasn't good. The wholesale wasn't good.
Yeah, Amy, just so, like, first of all, most people are just going to be listening to audio. If you go watch the video version, you can see Amy's in this gorgeous sweater. Every time I talk to Amy, she's in some different, amazing sweater. And so what your entire business is about is not just normal, everyday sweaters that people might, and not normal, everyday yarn. So I bet, there's a lot of people that knit and a lot of people into yarn, but probably the majority of our listeners don't know just how passionate people can be about yarn and how out there in a cool way your yarn is. It's not just everyday yarn. Could you just talk a little bit about that? Because I want to, the piece I want to get to is I know how, in working with the wholesale business, you're working with yarn stores, and now you get to work with people who are passionate about your yarn and the end user and what a difference that is for you. So you could just tell us a little bit about like what the yarn world is like and your yarn in particular.
Yeah, it's very unique. I can't think of one company that does it like us on the scale that we do it. There are artists certainly who do this and they make them and they create small batches, but not in the same way that we do. So the yarns are all hand spun. I said that. Many of them have things spun into them. So like all sorts of ribbons and trims. There's all different textures and colors because when you make something by hand, you can make it however you want to make it. One yard of the yarn doesn't have to repeat. It can be completely different. So we have no limits on what we can create with the yarn alone. It's really, really fun. And then from there, we go on to make. People really need to know what to do with our yarn. A lot of times people look at our yarn and they're like, it's hard to know. So we give you all sorts of ideas on what to do with the patterns that we create. But really our sweet spot is patterns that invite you to get wildly free with the yarn, wildly creative and free, and mix the yarns in a way that feels good to you, that somehow resonates with your inner creative, your inner artist. So that's really our sweet spot. And those are the types of patterns I try and put out into the world that are more like an invitation, like a recipe, but you go add your own spin to it. You combine the yarns and the colors how you want and make it your own. We'll just give you the framework and then you run wild. And those have been our most successful patterns and knit-alongs and now challenges. We just started doing those. And that's one of the challenges we just did was a bag, and it was incredible. That's something I never would have thought people would knit. Like, what, you want to knit a bag? Really? And every single one was different from the next. It was so incredible to see in action. I love seeing that.
Well, we're definitely going to want to hear about your community building and about the transformation that you deliver to people. But could you just just tell us a little bit about how you came into my world and what happened in your transition from wholesale to selling to creating your community?
I was doing this wholesale thing. It wasn't working. I knew it wasn't working, but I didn't really know what to do. And I got a phone call out of the blue from another one of your students, Shelly Brander, who's also in the knitting space, but a very different spin or different take on the knitting world and what she does. And she asked me to be a part of her Knit Stars. She said, hey, I just went to this event. I don't know if it was an event or read book or what it was, but she somehow crossed paths with your work and said, I just met this guy. There's this new way. I want to launch this new thing called Knit Stars. I haven't asked anyone to do it yet. Would you do it? And I said, yes. I was like, yeah, sure. That sounds awesome. And I think she just needed to hear that one first yes. And then, get the ball rolling and ask people that were actually way more famous and true Knit Stars beyond me. But it was really, really fun to be a part of that. So what happened was I said yes to that. I got everything together. She had mentioned your work. And of course, I'm thinking, well, I need some help in my business right now. So my radar is all up. But I don't think I read the book or found out anything about you until your son, Dan, came to film me for Knit Stars. It was a summer right after my second baby was born. And that's when I think I went down the deep dive of, first I looked and I was like, maybe I'll listen to some podcasts from him first. Then I got the Audible book. And then I was like, no, I actually need the physical book because I'm going to need to take some notes here. And maybe 6 months later, I did my first launch. So that's sort of how I entered the Jeff Walker PLF world.
How did that first launch go?
I mean, my world was freaking rocked. It was like the craziest thing I had. I guess to my credit, I had been collecting emails on my website for 7 years, but had never really emailed anybody. So that was good. My videos were terrible. My first pre-launch videos were so terrible. It was just, beyond cringeworthy. But I had the idea that I've got to teach something and we're going to knit something as a community and we're going to try this formula and see, how it works. And the first day I made $12,000, which was how much I made in a month. If I had a good month back in those days. And my entire world was rocked. I get chills just talking because I had never realized that I could make money when I wanted to and be able to set my own course and not be dependent on these yarn store owners who were where I was getting all my income from. It was just a true turning point in my life. It was unbelievable. I couldn't believe it actually worked. And I just remember feeling like I was walking on air, just like, oh my God, there's something here. There's this glimmer of something that might work for me here. And I don't even remember. Maybe we had 70 people in that first knit along. I can't remember, but we built it from there. I remember the next, for some reason, I always remember the first day is always the biggest day for us. So the second one was 6 months later and we did 17,000 that day. In 2019, I went out to PLF Live by myself. I didn't know anyone else. I was like, I'm going to a marketing conference. This is I'm just going to get some really great tactics. And I came home. My husband was like, you have joined a cult. What is happening? What's actually going on? And in the best possible way, I remember being on cloud 9 for a week after that event, just floating. And I think a big part of that was seeing the stories of some of the people I can't believe are now great friends of mine, like Kathy and Michael Walker and Julie. It was just incredible. But I remember that I was about to go into pre-launch right before that 2019 PLF Live, and I ended up refilming the videos in my hotel room, which was $50 a night. It was so bad. It was so horrible, but I stayed there. And I remember that time we did 57 in the first day. And then I joined Launch Club there, and the next launch was the craziest launch I've ever had in my life. And that was really, really moved the needle for us and changed changed everything even more. So yeah, so that's sort of how I used the book for a long time to get going. And then when I went to that first PLF Live, things really went on a different course.
You started off your first launch. You said it was like a knit along. Do you mind, like, what's a knit along, and how does that lead to making $12,000? Like,
just an asterisk. That's 12,000 in the first day, but
first day
they kept on going. Yeah.
I know I should keep track of the whole, but for some reason I just remember the first day. So I don't know how much. I know it rocked my world. So a knit along is a community event where we knit the same design together as a community, and participants or customers, they get a physical yarn kit from me, an online course on how to make that style from start to finish. They get in the moment coaching on Zoom, group coaching, and then of course the community, which is a big thing. Because you even said this, Chris, like, oh, there's a lot of knitters out there, but are there like even knitters that do your thing? So this is a community of knitters, like this kind of knitter, this very creative kind of knitter. So that's the premise of a knit along. They've changed and morphed a lot. I think this is going to be my 14th or 15th one coming up in May.
So they're opting in to essentially do, is it almost like a challenge in some way, like where they purchase upfront for the materials and the design, and then they get all the community, and they get to have you as the coach and the person, they get to share their work, I'm sure, and all those great things. And then like, are you launching something out of that, or is the money coming from the upfront, or like where's the launching come in there?
So the launching is for the knit along. So we always do a big launch for the knit along twice a year. At the end of the knit along, we added a membership to the back end. So we do have a membership. We have about 500 members in that. And I really think of them like our VIP customers. They are the diehard fans that join in a lot of knit alongs. They're really interested in any special products we do. So we do some like limited edition yarns and like an advent box, which is really fun around the holidays. So they love all sorts of things like that.
The community aspect of what you're doing just sounds like it's so crucial and key to the success of your launch and your business. I'm curious. I mean, you've done 14, 15 of these now. What would you say to someone who's thinking, I need to create a community like that, or I need to create community in my business? What would be some important keys for people to do around creating an active community that's vibrant and excited about doing the work like that?
Okay, I could think of a couple things. One thing that really is my guiding light is I'm obsessed with their success. I want them to finish with a project that they love and know that they've gotten the help that they want. They made it exactly how they like. They finished. They love it. And I often think about try and reverse engineer our launches to make sure that we've done everything we can during the course of the experience to set them up for success. So there's nothing left on the table. Everything that we could show them and teach them how to do pertaining to that design, we do. The other thing I try really hard to stress in the community is that it's a no judgment zone. So one thing that's so funny about knitters is that they can be very snooty, and there's a lingo to knitting. There's all these abbreviations and acronyms. And sometimes when you come in as a beginner, it's really intimidating. Like everybody knows what they're doing. I don't even know how to fix a drop stitch or find my size. So I really harp on that a lot, that this is a judgment-free zone. No question is too dumb. And what's so cool about that is that we really have all levels of knitters joining in our communities. And the folks that are really experienced help out the people that are just getting started in a friendly, judgment-free way that isn't shaming them, anything like that. And I think that we try and set that tone, myself and the coaches that we work with, that, no question is too dumb. Sometimes you'll see projects, there's drop stitches, there's mistakes galore, but it really, all that matters is that the person who made it likes it. So those are two things I think about a lot. We talk a lot about freedom of self-expression, and that any type of freedom of self-expression is welcome. So we have we have a big New York City contingency, and they are sophisticated and sleek, and they knit, in black and gray and neutrals. And then we have like the California crowd that's the complete opposite. So it's a place where really you can do you, whatever that means.
Knitting is a chance to express who they are. It's funny that you would see that, like that New York style versus the California. That's funny. That's really interesting.
And they're cool too. I mean, they're really cool. They're cool too.
Amy, I'd love to stick on for the community bit a bit, because it's something I think I'm good at. And I've been asked several times recently by folks, say, hey, do you have any training on how you do that, the creative community? And frankly, I don't. It's just something I do for our clients. And certainly you've experienced that, Amy, being in the mastermind. But I'd just like to stick with you on this a little bit about how you're building community, and maybe it'll help me articulate some of the ways I do. Because how do you get your folks, the experienced folks, to show up and help and mentor and not be snooty? How do you set that tone? How do you encourage them to do that?
I think part of the inherent built-in experience of our knit-alongs, and now we're experimenting with these challenges, is that it's a sprint. We're all making this thing together. So it feels like we're all in it together. There's a start date and there's an end date, which is something I learned from you. You can't sell the thing for forever. There needs to be a start date and an end date. I think if it went on forever, it would be harder. But because we're all in it, and there's calls and events and emails every day of the knit along, there is this built-in excitement and energy around it. And everyone is genuinely so excited to see others' progress, because even if they're a beginner, they can definitely be inspired by the colors and the yarns that beginner chose. So I think it's a genuine, just being a part of it, being a part of the energy and the creativity and wanting to help. So I don't know if I do anything specific, but I think having the schedule and the what we do in Facebook every day, and then within our Zoom calls, adds to the inherent accountability of the group and wanting to finish their project on time and cheer each other on. We also, this time around, we did prizes I guess we've done it twice. That was really cool. So we did a prize for best community cheerleader, or like most enthusiastic community. And I think that actually led to people like really going bananas. We also did a completion prize this time, which was really cool. And it was to encourage their success to finish. We knew that they could finish it in 2 weeks if they knit for 30 minutes a day. But I think that also drove people to want to finish and stick to the schedule and be a part of it for the period of the challenge. When we asked for the completion prize, we asked for a photo of their bag. And so we created this big Airtable gallery of all their bags, which was also amazing. And people wanted to be a part of that. They wanted to see themselves up there with everybody else's. So that may have added to the participation. We also asked for a video ask, and we just asked them one question: what was your favorite thing about this challenge? And it was so cool. Someone on my team went through every single one of them. And it really, it taught us a lot about what the most valuable thing is for our community, which is really the classes, and then that creative freedom piece of like the mixing of the yarns and the colors in a way that feels free and true to themselves. Those were their favorite things. So I don't know if that's a good answer, but that's what's working for me.
I mean, it sounds like you have prizes for community cheerleaders, but maybe like when someone does show up and they're a great, they have a great mentoring moment, do you find some way to shine the spotlight on them as like, this is what we do within the community, and this is why we're so powerful together?
Yeah. So, this time around on each Zoom, we did a shout out for different members. So if they were struggling, we just took a screenshot of their Facebook post. I mean, one lady, she had truly never knit before. And she was like, I've never felt so proud of myself. It was really cool. So we always did like 5 to 10 of those. And then I think midway through the challenge, we did one highlight that was just people who haven't started yet, because that's a big thing. Is that people feel behind, even though if they haven't started yet, even though they can totally finish and catch up, but they almost won't get started if they feel behind. So we did a highlight just like, hey, this person just did a gauge swatch. They just cast on, or don't get discouraged. And I think we will lean more heavily into that in the future, because that was something that came up on the video ask. A couple people were like, I didn't even get started because I felt so behind, because there is this crazy momentum of the community moving on ahead. So I think we'll lean into that more, but those community shout outs were cool. Well, they take time, but I think they were really worth it.
That leads into a question around, like, a community has to live somewhere, right? And that's usually based on industry and where people are in your niche, et cetera. And so there's probably no one right answer, but for you, what are you using to kind of be the house or the place in which people and your community get to be recognized or seen?
Yeah, so I'm super low tech. I do Facebook group. We might move off of that. We're considering it, but right now it's working. So we're in a private Facebook group. I host our classes on Teachable, and then we do Zoom. So it's just like Zoom recordings if they miss it, and then joining us live on Zoom. The tricky thing is that nothing is in one place. So that's the hard part, is that it feels like a lot for the team to manage all those moving parts. So, but it's working, but it kind of feels like at some point we may need to evolve to something where we can have everything in one place. The calendar is like another issue. A lot of people have problems with the calendar. So we're really trying to keep it as simple as possible. This knit along, it's going to be Monday, Wednesday, Friday, Saturday, 4 p.m. Like that's it. And just so you don't even have to think about putting it on your calendar, because that's been a pain point for people. But yeah, I haven't changed it since we started. So it is the same as it was 14 knit-alongs ago. Yeah, it's worked, but I think it would be a lot easier on the team if it weren't in so many different places.
One of the things I loved about what you said is and my interpretation of this is kind of what gets recognized gets repeated within a community, right? And recognition is something that I think so many people crave within their communities and within their passion, like knitting, right? Like I want someone to look at my stuff and do this. But then there's also people who sometimes are like, they get uncomfortable being stared at or looked at, right? And so, and this is something for either of you to answer, but I'm curious, are there any things, like we've talked about what you've done and what has worked, but are there any things that you definitely would never do again? And say like, I would never do this again because it definitely didn't work, and it didn't build the community, or it did make people less engaged. Because I think there might be people out there listening who, when they hear that, will be like, oh, that's a mistake I don't want to step into.
Yeah, I think one of my biggest flaws is that I want to add more and more to the membership and to the knit along experience, and more it doesn't necessarily serve the success of the customer. And it's taken me a long time to realize that simple is better and less is more sometimes. So I guess over the past year, the knit alongs became 8 weeks long. We had all these different Zooms, all different times. It just kind of mushroomed into a lot to manage. And each of these designs, to bring them out into the world, is really hard because we grade them for 9 different sizes. I mean, it's tricky. So what I've come back to is keeping in mind, how do we help our customers the most to have the best success possible? It's actually more simple. And so it's less designs. It's a shorter time period. Like I mentioned, Monday, Wednesday, Friday, Saturday Zooms, like that's it. We're just keeping it really, really simple. And what we've seen is our customers have more success when we do that, versus my inclination to add more and more and more and really make it like incredible, when actually that also not only burns me out and the team, it's too overwhelming for participants too.
Yeah, that makes sense. If you overcomplicate, or also making it consistent too. Like you said, it's always the same days every week, right? Consistency is so important when, in a sense, building your community and training them on what it is to be a part of this community, the norms and the rules and the culture, I think, is what we're trying to get to here, right? Are there any other key culture builders that you find are important to emphasize in, say, any community, or that you found like, okay, this is something I would definitely want to establish in a community if I was building my own?
One thing that we just implemented in January, which has been cool and very simple, is in our members area, in our membership Facebook group, we have every team member, so I have 8 team members, share once a month on Facebook. They weren't doing this because it was, some people, it's not part of their role, but they would just share what they're making. Didn't have to be pretty, could be, a messy, hey, I made a mistake here, but whatever, I'm working on it. Or it could be a beautiful finished object picture. That's been really cool because it allows the community to get to know our team better. And maybe they didn't know that Melanie was behind the scenes doing all these operations and also knitting like charted colorwork sweaters. So it's like they're getting to see us more, but it's also prompting more discussion within the group as well, because there are more people posting. So that's been really cool. And then we just appointed 2 community mentors who were longtime members of the membership. They're amazing. They're just sort of superstars. They just get the membership for free and like get some free yarn too. I think that's it. But they're in there just cheerleading nonstop. And they have their set days that they post and they're moderating. And that's been really cool to see happen too. So just since January, I feel like the energy level there, which is harder to maintain because we're not knitting something together all the time. Like I was mentioning in the knit-alongs, that's really added to the community and has been exciting. And we'll see posts with like 60 or 70 comments, which is really, it's cool. And it's different than how it was before. So that's been a small little tweak we've done that's actually like zero costs. That's been awesome. And the team likes it too.
That's awesome. Yeah. Well, finding those leaders within your community must be so important. Those people who are the examples that you want to set. And also, I love that you're encouraging them to show whatever they're working on, whether it's like, if everyone was just like, look at my perfect sweater that I just put out, and might establish a little bit of fear, like you were saying initially, around being in this like elite knitting community, right? Versus, a really welcoming community where everyone's like, getting to see the reality of knitting. It's not always perfect, right? So,
yeah. It's so funny because the team members' personalities have really come out. Like one person, she's every single photo is like a Beyonce like worthy photo. She's just like, it's just so perfect. And she would never post anything like about that. And then one team member, it's like surrounded by, this is like what mine would be too, surrounded by 100 balls of yarn, like, with couch and dogs and like kids and just like total chaos. So it's been really fun to see their personalities come out and see that people are relating to both types of posts and inspired by both types of posts. So we're just saying, hey, you do you, don't think about it. Don't pull an all-nighter thinking about it.
So could you share a little bit about your team and your business? Because this has grown up to be a significant business. You went from selling wholesale to yarn stores to that first launch, doing $12,000 the first day and rocking your world. And you've grown up a lot since then. Yeah.
So there are 8 of us. There are 4 full-time folks and 4 part-time. I can do math. 4 part-time. And the part-time people are the coaches and part-time customer service help. We have one person who just runs Zooms. So she's like the only extrovert among us. And so she runs all the Zooms. And let's see. And then within the full-time team, it's someone who manages the membership, myself, Melanie, who's director of operations, and then director of customer service. So those are the 4 people. And then we have the team of 16 in India that makes the yarn. So there are some days where it feels like a really big burden. Depending on the season, those part-time people can be full-time hours too. If we're in a knit along or a big launch and we need extra help, they will be many more hours. So it feels like a lot, but at the same time, I'm like, oh, I could really use help with this. Right now, I do all the marketing and sales still. So I'd love to get a little help with that at some point in the next 6 months. I think that's the next thing we're thinking about, is potentially someone to help me out a little bit with that side of things.
Such a significant team that you have, and you really take care of every part of the process too, which is also unique, I think, in this industry, because a lot of people who are listening may not be thinking about actually creating a physical product or marketing a physical product in some capacity, but you have that combined with actual training and community and all these things. I mean, are there any keys to success around like the dynamics of working with a physical product that's really important for people to consider if they are going to be working in that industry or trying to launch something that really is tangible and in their hands,
I'm a big fan of being unique, like really just doing your own thing and staying true to yourself and making something that you're really excited about and into. And I think those days when I was trying to create like black sparkle yarns for a store in New York City, they were never going to work because I never liked them. Like people could sense that, right? That I wasn't into it. So I'm a big fan of like, do your thing that you're really excited about, and then that's going to show and people will feel that. I think physical product with product launch formula is awesome because you already have inherent scarcity built into what you're doing no matter what. And that's why I think about day one as my most important sales day, because we've really trained our people that we're going to sell out. So you have to order that first day, or else chances are you're not going to get the yarn, or you can become a creative knitter and you're going to get access to the yarn the day before everybody else. And then you'll definitely get what you want. So there's really big built-in mental trigger to physical product. And all of the limited editions and special boxes we do, like those two, awesome. And we just do them as a special product drop. I'll do like one PLC video and just hey, email me when, notification when it comes in stock. And that just really simple, really scrappy, that's worked really well. So I'm a fan.
Amy, what was your best first day? Or didn't you have like a first hour or some crazy town? Yeah.
Yeah. So I think the story left off with that one right after I did PLF Live in April 2019. And that was like 57 or something in one day. The next launch was April 2020. And that first hour did $100,000. And I just remember calling my dad and being like, oh my God. And got on a call with Barry, and Barry was like, it's going to be okay. Cause I'm like, I don't have the yarn. What am I going to do? And he was helping talk me off the ledge. And it was just, unlike anything ever. We made $164,000 that day. And I think we did over $400,000 in that launch. It was incredible. We had 1,000 knitters, something like that. I can't remember how many. It was life-changing.
What's that like to have gone from working with yarn stores where it was difficult and the margins were hard and you weren't doing, creating your best yarn, your best work. You weren't working with the people, your end users, to now having this business where you work with so many people and you get to see their creations. And oh, by the way, the margins are way better and you did a lot.
It's actually a viable business now with these margins.
I mean, $161,000 in a day in sales. I mean, does any yarn enterprise ever do that? I mean, what's that like to have that?
I feel such a freedom with the business now that I never would have had with that business model. I get to just do my thing. I get to create what I want. And part of the challenge of a creative business is you don't know what people are going to like. But I still get, if I make a mistake, it's my own. It's not me trying to please anybody else. It just feels really freeing. I have a lot of friends in the industry that still go to wholesale trade shows, and just to feel like, oh my God, I don't have to go do that. I don't have to go do that anymore is incredible. I didn't go to this show in New York City, which is in Times Square, it's brutal. You finish it and you're like, I just got run over by a Mack truck. It's a retail show and you can do well. But this time around, I was like, I'll just figure something out online. I really don't enjoy going to that. And we had great January and February. We started these challenges in between the knit-alongs, and it's so powerful. And not just to be able to say no to things because I can, and I can still figure it out and bring the income in and not be beholden to these in-person events really take a lot out of you. And it's fun, but it's got really old real quick. Well, it's amazing.
Can you talk a little bit, just as your mom, you've got young children, you've got a husband with a serious career and you're managing this business. What's that like?
It's intense. I've gotten really good at taking care of myself first and realizing that if I don't go for a run or a walk or get my yoga in, I'm not going to be the best parent or the best boss or the best team member. So I really set big priorities around my physical and mental health. And it's not a ton of time, but every day I'm doing something. And it's just, I have to. My husband's schedule is a lot. So like, I might only work 6 hours a day out of the 8 hours I have childcare, but I've gotten my favorite yoga teacher in, and the quality of my work is going to be better because of it. And I think old me would have said, oh, you guys pound, like, just grind away. And I've let that go. I take walks like just all the time throughout my workday. Most of my calls I take as a walk. I find that when I move my body, I do much better work. So I try to do that a lot. And then when I'm with my kids, I try to really be present and put my phone down harder during launch times, but I try. I mean, it's not pretty all the time. There's a lot of laundry. I'm not a very good cook, so no one's eating like gourmet meals. It's not pretty, but it's good. It's like a very happy chaos.
You're also modeling for your kids, because this is what I feel like. Because Amy, you know my kids. You've been around my kids. They're adults now, but you know them very well. And I know there were times when they were younger where, growing the business, there's a lot going on. You're busy. Sometimes you're distracted. You're also modeling for your children as they grow up that, you're creating your life. You're creating your best life. You're creating a life where you can truly be the creative that you are. And I think just the value of that is just immense. And you will not see that because your kids are little. You're not going to see that for 10, 15, 20 years. Being the model of someone who is just going and creating the life you want is an amazing gift for your kids.
Yeah, that helps me on hard days, knowing that, like, even if I'm, worst case, not impacting all these knitters and team members, like just knowing that they're seeing me work on something that I adore, that I'm so excited to get out of bed and work on every day, keeps me going for sure. And it helps also with the time being away, I think. Like I have a trip to India coming up, and just knowing, but they're seeing me go, like, be out in the world and do these things. And definitely after my trips for the mastermind, I mean, I come back and I'm like, oh, I needed that time away. It helps.
You mentioned before, I mean, you've now transitioned into being like this full-on launch entrepreneur, right? And you are living this launch life, right? That sounds like it embraces the freedom and the passion, and getting to do the things that you want to do. What would you say to people out there that might be thinking about that journey for themselves right now and wondering, should I do it? Should I go for it? What would you say for them?
Definitely do it. Take that first step. Take an action. Do something and move towards it. And what I've learned, and I've probably said this already a few times, but is staying true to yourself, and what you want to create in the world is going to resonate with people the most. So don't try to be anybody else or compare and despair and look at this person or that person. Just really stay in your lane and do your own thing. That's served me so well. That would be my advice. So take that first step and keep going.
From what I'm hearing, it sounds like you really get to change people's lives through yarn and knitting. And one of the things we teach in PLF is honing in on what is the transformation that you can provide for your group of people, for the people that you are able to impact. And that can be a difficult thing for entrepreneurs to kind of figure out, and how to create that. And it sounds like you've really figured out how to articulate that for your niche and your people. Could you maybe talk about the process of discovering what that transformation was for your community and your people?
Actually, a lot of it came out of just reading Jeff's book and realizing, oh, I gotta figure out what that is for people. And then reverse engineering. I didn't realize that before. And I'm so grateful for it because it's incredible to witness these women create these sweaters or bags or whatever they're making, and see the transformation in real life in real time. So in the beginning, I just really thought about how knitting has impacted me, how it's made me better, and what it's helped me with in my own life, which is immense. And there's so many benefits to knitting. And I just dialed in on those, and I saw those also come up in people that have gone through our knit-alongs and what they said at the end of them. So some of the things in a knit-along we talk about a lot is the confidence. You finished this thing, like you finished this pattern, you didn't know how to do it, you learn new things, and there's this big power that comes from finishing things that can have a big ripple effect. I talk a lot about non-reaction. I'm also a yoga teacher, and that's an idea in yoga. We practice hard poses, or we practice putting ourselves in hard situations, like knitting a tricky pattern where the stakes are low so that we can practice non-reaction. So instead of hurling your yarn, like into the trash bin against a wall, maybe you take a minute, you breathe, you come back to it, and maybe practicing non-reaction in that low stakes way helps you in this challenging situation with your kids or your in-laws or a coworker. So that's something we talk about a lot. We talk about the creativity a lot. That's a big reason people join in, is just using knitting as a way to get to know yourself. Maybe who you were as a kid. What colors did you do? What kind of creative kid were you, and getting back in touch with that. We have a lot of people who were told they weren't creative growing up in school, wherever, by teachers. So getting back and debunking all of that garbage. I believe all people are creative. So we talk a lot about that. And then another big one is all the benefits that come along with moving your hands in a meditative way and the calm and peacefulness that brings about. And if you can get over the hump of learning how to knit, it takes some practice. It's not immediate, right? Like tennis or anything, you're going to have to get to a point where you've got it down. But once you get on the other side of that, there's so much good that you feel after you spend some time knitting or crocheting. So we talk a lot about those things. I think there are more if I were to go look at some of my scripts, but those are the ones that pop into my mind.
And what I love about that, and I guess for our listeners, is that, it's not just about learn to knit. There's a lot more beyond what it is that you're doing, that you're actually transmitting and transferring and transforming for people when they go through the program or go through what your offer is. And I think that's an important lesson for people to hear, is that you have to go beyond, a little deeper than just what you're teaching or what you're doing, to really get to the emotional core of why people want to do what you're offering. And it's just such a cool and awesome example of, like, you can take knitting and yarn and really impact and change people's lives in a tangible way for them.
Yeah, it's awesome.
Yeah, it must feel amazing to be able to do that in your life now, and to have discovered that, right? That you can have that kind of impact in a market that many people would say, like, can you even be successful there?
Yeah, it doesn't ever get old. Like, each time we begin a new project as a community, it never gets old. It's like a kid in a candy shop. It's just so exciting to see the projects come to life and see the creativity and how each one is different. It's so awesome. Yeah. And I think part of what we do, which we talked about a lot, is, the raw material all the way through the community and the teaching and what you do with the raw. I think there's nobody really doing it in that way in our niche, from the material all the way to the membership in the community. So I think it's just really staying in our doing what we do well, which is everything, but it's like continuing to kind of be the unicorn. Does that make sense? Like continuing to up level, and being a part of your community helps me so much, because not only is your business setting this example and I'm learning through what you're doing, it's also all the people that are in the mastermind who are just crushing it and super inspiring as well.
Amy, it was interesting just talking about our community, that Shelly Brander, who called you up and invited you to be in her Knit Stars, and Knit Stars came out of Shelly being at PLF Live and then being in our mastermind. But Shelly was the way she found her. I love the tapestry of how we're all connected. It's like my favorite hobby. Shelly came into my world, came into the PLF world, because she's a tennis player, and she was watching, and she's a marketer too, and she was watching Will Hamilton and his marketing, and of course, Will's in my mastermind, and we just interviewed Will a couple days ago for the podcast. And so it's like Will somehow, is working in his basement, or no, he gets out of college, he's living in his parents' basement, he's putting up videos online about tennis and not getting zero traction, comes into my world, ends up building this business, really, an amazing business teaching tennis. Shelly, who's a tennis player, sees that, learns, backtracks, figures out how Will is doing it in my world, sort of reverse engineers her way into my world, does it with knitting and Knit Stars, calls you up and says, "Hey, will you be in my Knit Stars?" And now here we are. You've been out to Durango. So all these, it's crazy.
Yeah, it really, and I don't think she ever said, like, you have to read this book or anything like this. She was just like, I got this great idea. I think this could really work. And the rest is history. She didn't know for a long time. And I think one day she texted me. She's like, I feel like you're doing a JV launch right now. And I was like, I am. And so I always tell her I'm so grateful. And she's so awesome. I'm so grateful for her. And just to have someone in the industry who really gets it, all facets, is just this amazing sounding board and friend to have.
Chris, we've got to get Shelly on the podcast. She'd be great.
Totally. Yeah, absolutely. So hit follow, everybody, so you can hear that one. We got lots of great people coming on. We might use this as this next, I kind of want to go to maybe a different section, and we might use this as like a bonus or something for people. But I'm curious, like, you have a fairly significant following on Instagram as well, 120,000 people that you've already built as a little community there with Knit Collage. How did you build that? And do you have some keys that people could use around building their own Instagram for business? Not just sort of scrolling, but really around the business element of how can you use Instagram to help build community, get more leads or engagement or whatever, and how does it show up in your business? Yeah.
Well, I'll start with one idea that has been helping me a lot recently. This is something I'm not great at, but I've forced myself to do. So we were selling into our Faye Fringe Bag Challenge in February, at the end of February. And typically I would post about 100 different random things that I'm knitting, because I'm always knitting 100 different random things. But this time I forced myself to only post about this. And everything went to just a really simple page that said, hey, sign up to be notified if you are interested in this bag challenge. And that worked so well. And it was just this testament. Don't like go in 100 directions like you want to. just stay in like whatever's coming up, whatever is the thing we're working on. And not every post was a sales post and sending them to the landing page. A lot of them were just, hey, I'm making this, I'm wearing it, whatever it might be around that. But that worked really well. And I had never done that before. I've always been more scatterbrained with what I put out on social. So we will stick with that. As far as building Instagram, I am really consistent there. I'm super authentic. I like being vulnerable. I like being silly. That is not my brand to be like that one team member that's really polished and looks like Beyonce every time. It's more real. So I show the mistakes. I show kind of the messiness behind it all. And I think people find that really relatable. Let's see. I think maybe my niche differs from some of your listeners, or maybe it doesn't. I focus a lot on inspiration and telling the story behind the yarns and the patterns that come to life. And I think this is something that works well for folks in creative fields or artists, is leaning into all the work that goes into bringing that to life, because it really builds up the inherent value in it. And people don't know that unless you tell them. And it doesn't have to be anything more than a 5-second reel sprinkled, every day or every other day, really telling the story of how this came to life and why it took as long as it did. And as you're doing that, you're showing like, this is why this is expensive. This is why, like, there's a lot that goes into it. This is why we charge so much, without telling them that at the same time. So that's worked well. I just started using ManyChat since February, and that's been a total game changer. I hope that doesn't go away on Instagram because it feels too good to be true.
Can you just break that down to what that is for people who maybe aren't familiar with how ManyChat works and how it would integrate with, say, Instagram?
Yeah, so really easy to set up. What it is you'll do a reel or a post or a story, and you'll say something or have text on the reel or the post that says, comment something. So for me, I'm doing spring. Comment spring below to be notified about our upcoming spring knit along. It could be anything. It could be my free workbook, my free download, whatever it is. People comment that, and there's an automation. So a bot responds to them, and you can customize these. So you can have like 10 responses. So it doesn't feel total bot-like, although if you're really paying attention, you realize it's a bot. And then they're automatically sent a direct message with a link to sign up for that thing. So I've always had this problem where I have more followers on Instagram than I have on my list. And it finally feels like there's a way for me to easily bring people from one place to the other. It's really exciting. So that has been awesome. And that's just been in the past month that I've finally got it together after hearing about it, for the umpteenth time, finally doing it. It's been awesome.
What is the role of, say, because there's lots of things you can do. You can use Messenger like you're doing with the bots. You can do Reels, which, can go from a few seconds up to I think 3 minutes now or something, where it's short form video. You can do physical posts where it's like picture posts, right? Or you could post stories, right? Which is, just something that's very temporary. Are you finding different ways to use each of those things, and where is the value for each of those things for a business? Maybe you can speak to that.
I love using Reels for that behind the scenes, tell the story of whatever it is we're creating or bringing to life. So I do a ton of me crocheting and knitting out in the world. Those do really well. I think text on Reels is really important, and that's the easy way you can get your call to action to people without having to say read below, because they'll just read it right there. And you can update your cover photo so it doesn't have text, which I like. For a lot of brands, it doesn't matter if there's text in your cover photo. I like mine to look like a pretty picture without text. So I think it's important. The reels that have done really well, especially for ManyChat, have had text on them. And for my stationary photos, those tend to be the photos I take with a professional photographer of real models, of our designs, showing them styled in different ways, or the professional photos we've had done of the yarns. But I use reels way more than I do stationary posts. They just get a ton more views, a ton more interactions. And then stories, I think stories are a great way to interact more with your audience. So you can ask them questions, you can do polls. So it doesn't feel so one-sided, like you're just watching me, that, you are asking them to engage with you in other ways. I think stories are great for that. They're also a great way to show, if you want to be more vulnerable, more authentic, and less polished. I think those are the ways to show all of that. And depending on how much you want to show of your daily life, your process, things like that. But I love stories. I'm a big fan of stories.
Like the behind the scenes of what you're doing, right? Yeah. They're very personal that way, right? Because it's just quick on your phone.
I think it's a way for people to get to know you. Like recently, it's almost spring here, and every day on my stories, I'm posting like signs of spring. And so people are learning, like, she's got a deep appreciation for nature. So it's a way for them to, I think, get to like and know and trust you better. Doesn't have to be specifically about your niche.
Is there anything you can say about hashtags around, like, you got to use these hashtags, or right kind of like, I know every niche has their own style, but how important are they? How many? That kind of thing. I know this is a little bit tactical, but I'm really curious what your opinion is on it.
I always use a few, and I tend to use the ones that I just really like, that are like one word. They're not hard to read. So I use like Knitstagram a lot. I always use hashtag Knit Collage because people use Instagram to search for our projects a lot. So if you look at hashtag Bay Fringe Bag, which is the challenge we just finished, you'll see, and people love that because then they can get inspired by other people's projects. And it's almost inherent social proof. So I use them more for our own business and whatever the project is, plus Knit Collage versus other hashtags. But I do use those sometimes. I'm not sure if they are moving the needle or not. I think more the consistency, the trending music. We didn't talk about that, but that's really important for Reels, using trending music and being consistent with them.
Awesome. Thank you so much for that. I think that'll be very helpful for people on Instagram who might be looking for some keys to success there. All right. Well, this seems like a perfect time for a quick 2-minute taco break, which I know you're excited about. So this is where we ask some fun taco-related questions. We start off with the mild ones that we ask everybody, and then we get steadily spicier with them and a little bit more custom. So the first question that we consistently ask here is, when it comes to tacos, are you hard shell or soft shell?
Soft.
Soft shell. All right. Another one for the soft shell. Just good. What about, are you pro guacamole or no guacamole?
100% guacamole on everything.
100%. Team guacamole. I love it. Spicy or mild tacos for you?
I like spicy. I married a Texan who, like, every week we have a new hot sauce delivered to our house. So I think it's his influence that's coming in. Because if you had asked me before we were married, probably not. But now I'm a convert.
Well, also, what about India? I mean,
love it. Love. Different kind of spicy. Also really good.
Yeah, I'll say that, Indian spice is like a different level of spice. I've not ever had anything spicier than certain types of Indian food. So here's a question, it's a little meta, but like, if you had to engage a community centered around taco making, all right, what would you do to engage that community online?
I think I would ask people to share their most creative taco recipe or taco they've ever made, and get a conversation around, like, how have you put your own spin onto a traditional taco? It would be something along those lines, I think.
Would you choose to do something called taco yoga or taco meditation?
Do we know what that means? Is there anything else, or is it?
I'm just curious. I don't know. No, I know it's a difficult choice between the two.
I think yoga.
Okay. I'm just picturing the taco meditation where it's like, think about the tacos. You're adding in the tomato.
I was imagining it like you eat tacos after you meditate is how I was imagining it. Should be great too.
I thought it'd just be total taco relaxed meditation. All right. What about this one? If you had to knit a taco themed sweater, how would you approach that task? Like, would it be like just the taco colors, or would it have little taco imagery on it? Or how would you think about that from a creative perspective?
That would be so fun. I think I would want like one giant taco because I'd want it to be a powerful, like, oh yeah, that's a taco sweater, not little tacos. Like, no, she's making a statement there. That's a taco sweater.
Definitely, right? Yeah, I think that so people could see it from a long way away. That's a taco sweater, right? Absolutely.
Not look like a taco if I made it really small, because it's sort of like designing on graph paper, the way that when you're working with different colors and knitting. And I just don't know if really small you would get as much bang.
I'm also thinking with the way with your yarn and your design, I mean, it'd be 3D, right? I mean, you could have a 3D taco with like, the guacamole pouring out of it, and there's your pico on it.
It could be really cool. We could even like spin some like little peppers into the yarn. We could crochet some peppers and like spin those into the yarn or something. I don't know. Could get weird.
I love it. I love it. That'd be a great knit challenge, right? Taco knitting club or something. But, it's like, I'm curious. I mean, maybe it's the thing, but how there's the whole theme around ugly Christmas sweaters, right? I don't know if you guys do something around that or not, but I'm now picturing like a taco sweater party or something like that where people come together for that.
We don't do ugly Christmas sweaters.
Because their sweaters are beautiful, by the way. Like, that's the thing. So, well, thanks so much for the quick 2-minute taco break where we got to talk a little bit about taco and taco knitting. That's awesome. To finish things off here, and some final thoughts, we obviously have a pretty awesome community of entrepreneurs listening to us here, or aspiring entrepreneurs, that many of them are aspiring to do their first launches. And, maybe they've done a few, or they're just in that process of building a business and they're looking for answers. I'm curious for you, why should people dare to launch?
Earlier, I talked about that freedom I felt because I'm not beholden to these yarn store owners, and because I've learned that I can make money when I want to through product launch formula, my list, these knit along experiences. And I would hold that. What's that vision of what's that freedom look like for you, and how amazing it is. So taking any small action towards that is so awesome, and living from that place of authenticity and not making yourself small or into the person who designs black sparkle sweaters for a New Yorker. And just holding true to yourself. Yeah, it's an amazing space to be in. So I would encourage everybody to go after that and take some small or big action to move towards it.
Thank you for that. And thank you so much for coming on and sharing your story. If people do want to learn more about what you're doing and get a chance to learn more about your yarn and knitting, where can they do that? How can they find you?
So you can head to the website, knitcollage.com, or follow me on Instagram. Those are the places I'd recommend.
Awesome. Well, thanks so much for coming on, Amy. It's been wonderful chatting with you today. And for all of you out there, Launch family, thanks for listening. And we hope this conversation inspires you to dare to launch.